more boldly, but through a third party sharing your opinion. Thanks, Ivan. So for those of you who don't know, our discussion today is on the pros and cons of a universal basic income. So Edward, you raised the question, and I'm so grateful because I had a preconceived idea of what it was, and I just and understood that it was just an extension of a welfare system. So I did some research, which was very helpful, and so just to kind of make sure we're all on the same page, a universal basic income is a proposal that a country or a region, so like the European Union, say SADC, would decide that they would institute a set amount that wouldn't vary. It would be the same for everybody, and that everybody all citizens, all individual citizens, so it wouldn't be families, every individual citizen would get this set amount, and there would be no means test. In other words, you wouldn't have to prove that you were earning or not earning a certain income in order to qualify. So that would be universal, everybody, individual set amount. And the idea of that would therefore be that the time and effort and cost of the proving that these means tests would be done away with, and you would therefore be able to recoup some of the costs. It would also mean that you wouldn't be forcing people into poverty in the sense that you're almost ensuring that they don't earn a certain amount in order to qualify. So in other words, the idea is that you're almost lifting the lid of people being able to earn as well, because they don't have to prove that they're not earning in order to get this basic income. And the reason why people like Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk are proposing it I initially thought that they were proposing it out of guilt, like I've made a lot of money, so let me give it back to the poor. But what I recognize now, and I may be oversimplifying it, but they are people who are at the coalface of development. They are seeing where 4IR is going. And with each industrial revolution, we've seen that people have been worried about jobs that are going to get lost, but we've seen that each revolution has actually increased the possibility of jobs. The level of change that is going to happen with the fourth industrial revolution could reverse that. And we could, in actual fact, see massive job losses, like nothing that we could possibly anticipate. And so people like Elon Musk, who is seeing that possibility, is saying, therefore, we need a different system to ensure that people are that there's a lifestyle that people can have a living wage. So it's never going to make anybody rich. And governments are still going to have to pay for it, and people are still going to have to pay for it. So that's my way of introduction to try and sort of explain my understanding of a universal basic income. But the other thing that I want to just add in here as my little opinion is I think it is a wonderful debate for developed countries. I think if you are a developing country where there is still huge discrepancy between rich and poor, and between historic advantaged and disadvantaged people, there is absolutely no ways you're going to be able to fly a universal basic income in South Africa, where previously advantaged people are now also going to get money from the government. Can't see it happening. So that's my take.
Great, thanks, Lee. Nice introduction. So, Ed, I think we have to come across to you now. So, tell us why you're such a strong advocate for this, and then how you see it working.
Yeah, I think Lee got the sort of the basic explanation quite right, but it's been going on since before the AI thing. Previously, the masses were the engine of the economy, but with automation, with computerization, and now with AI, the generation of wealth, and actually the where wealth lies, is with a few individuals, not with the masses. Now, basic universal income or universal basic income will kind of provide that bottom layer in the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it will allow, and maybe sort of the next layer as well, and it will allow individuals and society to benefit from all the stuff in the top layer. And I could wax lyrical about the benefits of that, but I won't. I'll say that for another time. I'm going to go slightly off subject, but it is relevant. There's a principle in there which is extremely relevant to the discussion. When I was 16, a friend of mine died in the toilets in the market square of Cambridge from a heroin overdose. Drugs problems were a big thing when I was a child. A few days ago, a 16-year-old girl who lives pretty close to me died from a drugs overdose in very similar circumstances. We have tried to combat drugs for the last 50 years by using the same methods. And for 50 years, lives have been wasted and young people have needlessly died. Now, in Portugal, they had one of the worst drug problems in Europe, and they tried a new approach. They gave drugs away for free. And almost overnight, they reduced the crime rate massively. Very few people died from drug-related deaths. And in fact, the number of drug addicts decreased because they were engaging with people were engaging with them, and they were going on to rehabilitation programs. Now, they trialed that in the UK, in one town in the UK, and they got exactly the same results. But it was never introduced further because of dogma. There's a paradigm that drug addicts are bad, and you don't give stuff, you're not nice to bad people, you punish them. And there's the same paradigm with money. Money's precious. You don't give it away, especially if you're giving it to people you think are feckless and lazy. And that's the paradigm that's going to destroy the economy, because actually you're not giving that money away. You're priming the pump. And when you've primed that pump, you can then access a huge well of good stuff, because you've done away with the need for people to be on benefits. In the UK, we've tried to solve the problem with a benefit system, and we give poor people money and make them prove they're poor, and we trap them in poverty. Other countries that haven't got a benefit system, well, crime replaces that benefit system. So if we have a universal basic income, we do away with poverty, we do away with crime. And I think, yes, we need to think about how it works in the developed world. But if you go into the developed world, you will find very rich people. If you go into the developed world, the undeveloped world, you will find resources being used. Who owns those resources? Extractive industries have made fortunes, but who actually owns the Earth's resources? So I think it could be a giant step forward that really powers the economy. It's not being nice to poor people, it's actually making the economy work in the new conditions where we aren't so reliant on human labor to produce results. So those are my thoughts, and I'm really interested to hear what other people have got to say.
Great, thanks, Ed. Yeah, I think some really interesting ideas and concepts there that make one think differently about it. So, seeing that he's been avoiding us for nearly 2 weeks on Pumalelo, I think we have to come to you next. Pumalelo, are you with us?
Sorry, I missed you completely there. And yeah, I was also still trying to find my bearings. As much as Lee explained what the topic was about, I was still lost a little bit. So yeah, maybe let's, if you don't mind, let me hear what others have to say, and probably will formulate in my head exactly what the topic is about.
Okay, no problem. All right, Steve, let's go across to you then.
Thanks, Ivan. Morning, everyone. Sure, this is an interesting topic. I thought I would share with you a couple of things, mostly sort of anecdotal from my own experience. So in any given month, 80 to 90% of my income does not come from a sort of capitalist transactional paradigm. I essentially function off this basic universal income principle, in that I do not have a job that pays me a salary for services rendered, and neither am I invoicing for about 90% of my income. I am gifted that by a team of supporters and partners who have bought into kind of the vision that I'm trying to live out. And what's really fascinating about that is I think the people who disbelieve in the idea of this kind of system would say that as soon as you give people things for free like that, they will just get like our American intro this morning. They'll just sit around on their ass and do nothing. And conversely, in my experience, I found this to be one of the most productive seasons of my life so far, in terms of creativity and in terms of engaging with other people and some team projects, etc. And I've been trying to think through, how do I distill that? Because I know that is also not the case. You know, if you look at a lot of the facts, even though I get Ed's point that you can't contrast a welfare system, I think, with a basic universal income. I do think there are differences there. But I've been trying to distill what makes the difference between, you know, people who granted a salary, for lack of a better phrase, in a month, and will then just sit around doing absolutely nothing, and people like myself, without one, I'm not trying to blow my own trumpet here, but that will make something of that. And I think there's a lot to do with some of the culture that produces a person. And I'm not talking about sort of ethnic demographic in terms of culture. I'm talking about the formational aspects of how they're brought up, what's happening around them, what are the leading influences in terms of how they think about life, etc. So I don't think that a basic universal income system is merely a financial one. It has to be quite a bit broader than that, because it has to hold that well. You know, if I think about Ed's comment about the Maslow hierarchy of needs, I think one of the dangers that people see in a basic universal income is often a less focused on part of Maslow's theory, in that he says if you overmeet a need at any level, if that need is satiated, the person does not actually move forward to the next level of having their needs met. And I think that has been one of the questions that I'm trying to answer in terms of what does it mean to allow people basic universal income? Would it mean that would they be satiated at that level of basic needs, and would they not want to then go further? And so I think, you know, that's what the capitalists have always relied on in terms of the profit incentive or the profit motive around people being productive, and, you know, countries and economies turning over and people, you know, getting their livelihoods in that way. But my experience has been very different. I haven't had to work for this money. I've been given the opportunity in this season to just go and explore as widely as I can. And I have found it to be incredibly creative and productive. And so I definitely think there's something there. although I don't think you can just take one person's experience and extrapolate that across an entire population group. And I am trying to think further and further about distilling what comes out of this season. Yeah, I think I'll leave it there. Interested to hear what other people have to share. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Steve. Yeah, I think that in my mind would be slightly different from a basic income, but I don't understand the details, obviously, of how you getting your revenue in. But it's very interesting, and I think we have to go to Trevor Nell next now and see what he thinks. Trevor, are you with us? Can you push the right button? There you go.
I'm trying, but the buttons don't work. I need someone to contribute some funds to me so I can employ a secretary here, I think. So look, this is a fantastic topic, and I was up at 3 this morning on YouTube, and I was blasting away because I knew nothing at 3 o'clock of basic income grants. So it really took me into different countries and different perspectives, and the quoted examples seem to be coming out of Norway, Canada, and Namibia, of all places. And Namibia calls theirs a basic income grant. And having gone, I also went into India, because India have got over 1 billion people. And I think when we analyze this, we've got to take it from a sub-Saharan perspective. We've got to look at it from our experience here in South Africa, and not Ed's experience in the center of cosmopolitan England somewhere. So Ed, that was a stab, Ed. And my thoughts are, while it sounds interesting, I think that's its biggest problem right there. That the basic income, not basic income grant, the UBI, says everyone should get the same from day one. And I know that our biggest problem in this country is one thing. No, it's two things. No, it's one thing. Corrupt politicians. So I'm just putting them all together. And the only individuals that will be responsible for nominating what that figure is to go out to everyone is going to be who? The state. Meaning it's going to be politicians. So what are you going to do? If you want to be a politician that is running number 2 in the election in the next 5 years, and everyone is only getting a above poverty line of 1,860 Rand here locally per month, what are you going to offer them as the next political party coming in? I think I'll offer you 2,200. Okay, and then I'll trade that out again for 3,000. And let's see, the best political party is going to offer more and more to people who are reliant on this income. What do the examples show of those that have applied this, and only in areas, is that where they expected productivity to increase, it didn't. So it wasn't an incentive for increase in productivity. What it did is it allowed people to actually gain a little bit more meaning in their lives. That especially in Norway, and you can hear the Showa type thing coming out, that they felt that they had a bit more extra time to go hiking and follow. And this is probably why Ed likes this system in a big way. He just wants to go off trail running and that sort of thing. No, I think there is a considerable law of unintended consequences that will come with moving one decision that says everyone gets this figure, and then you have to ask yourself, well, who's going to be in control of that figure going forward? And there are many other challenges with the system. Sounds great. but I don't know what happens in a country like South Africa. So I've got many more negatives than I've got positives out of this thing. And I don't understand why Bill Gates and why Musk would be doing it, apart from recognizing that, hey, I can control this lever because everything else will disappear. In India, they talked of 984 different welfare grants would be collapsed overnight to actually put this system in. And then they worked out, because you've got to go to the numbers, they didn't have enough money to give everyone this universal basic income grant. In fact, they worked out that if they did that overnight, everyone would get 22 rupees per day. I think that buys a grain of rice a day. Do the numbers.
Thanks, Trevor. Yeah, it's interesting. I see Ed has said, argue against corruption, which something was created by corruption. I think corruption is the pervasive problem. It's going to reoccur in all sorts of different situations. I don't think the system is going to change that, unfortunately. But that's just my opinion. So Donovan, let's go to our first mobile attendee this morning. Let's see if we can get across to you.
Thanks, Ivan. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, I'm all for it. I was thinking of oxygen. I mean, we all have access to free oxygen, and just realizing the importance of oxygen. So that income, if you compare it to oxygen, it's critical. So if we can have that in place, a lot of problems will be sorted overnight, like your crime, people suffering, at least people will have food to eat, etc., place to live. That's on the positive side. Now on the negative side, I was thinking in terms of your entrepreneurial spirit might be crushed, new innovations, technology, improvement in production methods, etc. All of that might suffer because now those same entrepreneurs will be dependent on it. They might not see a reason to come up with new ideas to generate income to sustain themselves. So that's one of the negatives I can think of. Other negative is laziness. It can lead to laziness because people won't be motivated to work or find something to do or study or develop themselves. They'll just be happy with that basic, income, and that's it for them. Thank you.
Thanks, Donovan. Yeah, lots of interesting challenges. I wonder whether they all can be thought through, never mind have been thought through. So Cecile, let's come across to you next.
Hi, guys. Yes, I actually didn't really know what it was, but what the concept was that when Lee proposed that yesterday. But this morning, it made me think of about 10 years ago, I was in, now this is going to sound very funny because it's not exactly a South African thing. I was in Cuba, and it was, besides the most fascinating visit that I've had, was just post Fidel Castro. He was not in command yet. It was Raul that was in command. Fidel was sick at that time. But the guy that was our guide had been a teacher, and he'd first been an officer in the army. Then there was a accident and he lost his eye, so then he went into teaching. So he was a very educated guy, and his kids lived in America, and he was like third generation Cuban, or maybe many generation Cuban. And the way that he explained the Cuban society to us sounded absolutely fantastic. In Cuba, every single person has a house. Every single person gets like a coupon system where they go and get their food every day. Schooling is for free. All medicines are for free. then the bad thing is that the big brother watches you, because every month, and there's I must show you guys once. There's a little coupon that you get, and your whole family is on this coupon. So every week when you go and collect your basic foodstuffs, they know exactly where you are at any given point in the day, in the month, in the year. So when it comes to that, it's not a good thing, because big brother is watching you everywhere. But the Cuban people are very, very happy-go-lucky people, because they have all the basic needs that they do need. And they are very rich people in Cuba. But they are not very, very poor people in Cuba, not like in South Africa. So, yeah, so maybe that is the kind of idea that the universal basic income could be, just to, I don't know, to lift, so that people have a house, a medical aid, a school, and food, to lift the society. I'm not for that kind of society. Well, what is it called? Communism at all. But it was just interesting to hear how Raul how he saw that. So yeah, so maybe that's something that countries could think about, without the communism part of it, like Trevor was saying, the politics in it. When politics enters, everything goes pear-shaped.
Thanks, Cecile. Sorry, yeah. One of the problems with typing in the chat box is you lose your control over your unmute. So right, so here we go. I've got to get ambidextrous here. I think that's what it's all about. You've got to do, like the good old economist, on the other hand. So we've got to work this out. So in that case, I think we better come across to Jasper.
Morning. Yeah, I think fortunately we don't have to solve this issue because I don't think it is solvable, because corruption has nothing to do with the system, it's to do with mankind, and corruption has been through the ages. It doesn't matter what system you apply, corrupt people will always find ways to, and corruption can be about greed, and corruption can be about power control. And I think the combination is toxic. So, and I can just in my mind, so first of all, my first question, trying to be practical, say, people love to say the state will do this. Now, who is the state? The state has nothing, has never produced anything of any consequence positively ever. They're there to oversee some stuff, but when it comes to economic, they in good cases, they at least not spoil it. In bad cases, they corrupt it and disrupt it. So where will you then find the productive people? And, again, the do-gooders out there love to hate the rich and the people who went out to build stuff. But I can tell you, when Mark Zuckerberg started off with his first thing, he wasn't thinking about money. He was just creative. So for a lot of people, the same with the Bill Gateses of this world, and along the way, the opportunity presents itself, and they meet a universal need. And if you meet the need of billions of people, the billions will come to you. So the challenge here is, yes, we need to get people into their significance. We need to get people into their creativeness. That's not the issue here. But first of all, where will the money come from that will give that universal? And like Trevor said, when will enough be enough? Because already, if you look at Marikana, people were earning about 9,500 Rand on average. And they still went on strike and killed their families. And now they don't even have jobs left because the mines are now gone. So I just think we go about this whole thing totally wrong. So I can't see any universal thing happening where it's in the hands of the state, and we don't have that kind of economy. And then the next one is corruption and control. Like Trevor said, if you now have this thing hanging over your head, we already see a play out of that every election time, when people are, the news gets spread that, listen, if you don't vote for this specific political party, your SASSA pension will be taken away. So, you know, that kind of control. And I think Cecile alluded to that in the Cuba example. So I think it's more an understanding, and this thing goes back as you know, the very early Christians tried that whole thing, and there was a time when they had a whole welfare thing that nobody suffered anything, but that thing soon got corrupted to the point where Paul a little bit later said, listen, if they don't want to work, then they don't eat. So there must be some sort of a motivation for people to contribute. So it's just the nature of man that if there's nothing that prompts him to get up in the morning to go and find work to eat, that most people are just lazy, and it is then up on the shoulders of a few people to try and carry the whole world. And I don't think God ever intended it that way. So maybe, yeah, it would be wonderful if there was a way, but I don't see anyone human in our current dispensation that can create something like that. So maybe the next best thing is just to make opportunities as equally accessible to people as possible. So take away punitive laws that are against entrepreneurs. You know, create tax incentives to say, you know, on the first X amount of things that you produce, you don't have to pay tax. Or things like that. And I think Singapore for me is a good example of a well-functioning society. They don't have welfare, but they have a fixed 15% tax rate, and that was way back when I was there. But they are not unemployed people, and they are not hungry people. Everybody somehow, they don't maybe live in mansions and stuff like that, but it's a functioning society. So for me, it's rather about universal or free opportunities, and take away all the bureaucratic measures and controls where someone else who has never built a business in his life tries to control you. So I'd leave it at that.
Thanks, Jasper. All right, Pumalelo, you're up next.
Sure, yeah, this is a big topic, and I think there's many different angles from which you can argue it and find evidence for your argument and so forth. And so in what I'm going to say, it does not mean that I'm completely ignoring other parts of this argument. But possibly what I'm going to talk from has a lot to do with personal experience and probably history as well. And I'm aware that that perspective does not give answers to all the questions. What I can say is that from experience, poverty can be quite debilitating. What that means is that even when you have the creativity in mind, you have the want to be productive, you have things you want to do, when there's poverty, it makes all that a bit impossible. It makes it a bit difficult. It still becomes welfare that you then depend on others, not so much maybe the big system of the state, but on others to pitch in and assist until such a point that one is able to stand on their own. That was my personal experience. Because at home, they could not afford half of the things that I was so eager to do. And I believe I'm a contributing a member of society. Even when we're in poverty at home, I wanted so much to contribute. But it was difficult to do so on a burning stomach. It was difficult to do so when you don't have money for taxi to then get to a place where you can contribute and make a difference. And so what was my welfare system? My welfare system was the neighbors, was the church people, was all kinds of other people that will then say, hey, we see you are eager, we see you want to do something, and it's not possible. Here's a 20 Rand, here's a 10 Rand, go and try. And so from that perspective, there's a part of me that says, it helps to have a starting block. It helps to have a foundation to start from. It allows one to then start saying, how can I become creative? How can I increase? How can I do more? And so from that perspective, I tend to be inclined towards that. I sort of also struggle with the whole idea of laziness. I don't think laziness is only ascribed to getting something for free. I think it has to do with an innate drive of a person. There are rich people who are lazy, and it just helps that they are surrounded by wealth and by money. Sorry, let me make this example as well. My mother was one of the most hardworking people I know. Very, very, very hardworking. In actual fact, my mother was so hardworking and made so little out of it that at some point, it just said to us, why work so hard but to live so poorly? Everybody that became managers at my mother's company where she was working, they were trained by her because she understood the system throughout. But they will go on to make more money. She would still work so hard. And so sometimes one struggles with this direct connection that you work hard, you will make it. If you're lazy, you will not make it. I know it's a very difficult argument I'm making there. I'm just putting these out to say, consider that. It just so happened that as much as that was the case, I'm generally just a driven person and hardworking. In spite of all the lack there was, I think I work harder than most people who were rich. I then went to a white school. I was exposed to kids who came from wealth, and I was doing better than them at school. I was putting in so much effort in spite of it. So this thing that because you get given something will always lead to laziness, I'm not sure if, in my personal experience, I haven't heard that. In actual fact, it's helped me to say, somebody has trusted me with this. I have to make sure I make use of it. I told my story and I said it once. I used to say at school, I don't have an alternative. The person who's given me this money so that I'm here at school, I count on having to do that, because if I don't use that money, there's no alternative. I can't go anywhere else. And so I think that's where the challenge and the difficulty is with the system. There are people who will be lazy. There are people who it will help to say, oh, something has given me a platform to start from somewhere and go to other places. Last one, but not least, and I know I've sort of not tied up all these loose ends I've left. I also find it fascinating that we only ascribed corruption to government. I am the first person to admit and to say it is the most absolutely horrendous things that government do in being corrupt, because then they curtail so much of the potential of people. But let me also put out the argument that the corporate sector or the private sector is no better. Yes, there are those who do things well and do clean and do them, but just as much in the corporate sector, there's just as much corruption. Why am I raising that? It does not mean that corruption is only an element of a system. This is where I agree with Yasko. It's an element of a people, whether they're in government, whether they're in corporate, whether they are in other form of system. Corruption is corruption. We just have a mindset that tends to only link it to government. Yeah, let me, I like Trevor says, ascribe corruption to corrupt people. That I agree with, and not to a system, not to a government, not to a corporate sector, but to a people that tend to have corruption in their heart. Sorry, I took long for somebody who wasn't sure what we were talking about.
It's absolutely 100% Mpumalelo. Great to have you back, and I'm glad you're feeling better and you are able to give us your thoughts in the manner that you do, because I think there's always quality and value that you add in there. So thanks for that. Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating discussion, isn't it? And I mean, there's so many elements that come into this whole thing. Yeah, you know, I saw Ed posted on Facebook. He just finished watching David Attenborough's The Living Planet, and I've just finished watching it as well. And you know, the thing that that ended up for me. I mean, the first half of it is extremely depressing. But the second half actually comes back with some really positive thoughts and ideas and ways of actually moving forward. And, you know, for me, I think the focus in terms of UBI is wrong. I think the focus should be in terms of the correct application of funds that are actually generated, in terms of creating opportunity, creating upliftment, creating the right kind of education, creating the right kind of environment, creating the right kind of society that enables people to become earning, productive, contributing members of a system that works. I think the big problem we've got across the world is 99.9% of the systems that are out there actually don't work. They're controlled, they're manipulated, they're managed primarily by the people who've got the money. And I think that's where this whole thing comes to the fore for me is again, it comes down to an element of control. How do we control? And the biggest controller in the world has always been, and probably always will be, money. And I think that's where the problem actually comes out for me. So it's getting the systems right, getting the processes right, getting back to a sustainable way of life. If we can create a truly sustainable way of life for everybody on the planet, the need for universal basic income disappears in my mind. So yeah, anyway, those are just my final thoughts on the matter. So Lee, over to you to wrap up and tell us what's on the cards for tomorrow.
Edward, thank you. You suggested the topic, and it has definitely invigorated great discussion. And so thank you for that. And I don't think it's a conversation that we should let drop. I'm not saying we continue with it tomorrow, but I'm definitely thinking we need to revolve back to this, because I actually posted my post for Wisdoms this on yesterday was, unless we as citizens are contributing with our thinking, with our engagement, and putting our thoughts together as part of the public discourse, we are leaving it up to government, you know, people in power who have all the money, and what is our responsibility and what is our contribution in terms of informing and building a contribution to that public discourse. So I think this is essential. I think it is absolutely necessary that we continue these level of discussions, and I do think we're just touching, you know, the tip of the iceberg. So let's dive even deeper tomorrow, put more of the cat amongst the pigeons, and it came from my own response to Trevor saying corrupt people are corrupt, because I disagree. I think systems create corrupt people. And so I would like us to discuss that tomorrow, is what is corrupt? How does corruption happen, and how can we stop it? What's going to end corruption? So let us go from there. Yeah, more corruption tomorrow.
All right, thanks, Lee. So thanks everyone. Go forth and have an uncorrupted day, I hope, and come back and sort out the problems of the world again tomorrow morning. So have a great one. We'll see you then. Cheers now.